Joseph Stalin. Let's say you were born in the Soviet Union during the mid-1920s to 1953. One day you decide to go take a stroll, but mistakenly looked at a portrait of Stalin without bowing down or kneeling to show absolute respect. There's a high chance that would be the very last stroll you'd ever take. Let's start with the Great Purge of 1936 to 1938, which was Stalin's version of extreme office politics. Imagine that your annoying colleague who always steals your lunch suddenly vanishes. Now multiply that by millions and you have the Great Purge. Stalin basically targeted and killed anyone he suspected of disloyalty, which included political opponents, military leaders, intellectuals, and even random folks who just had the misfortune of looking shifty. Approximately 700,000 people were executed, and over 1 million were sent to the Gulag, which was a brutal labor camp that would make even a hellfire sound like a picnic. To make matters worse, Stalin was determined to transform the Soviet Union into an industrial superpower within 5 years. This means he basically forced millions of peasants to abandon their private farms and join collective farms, and any resistance was met with brutal beatings, punishments, and deportation to Siberia. It's like telling a kid to build a Lego skyscraper overnight and threatening to take away their toys if they don't. Stalin's reign finally came to an end on March 5, 1953, when he suffered a stroke. Ironically, his own paranoia may have contributed to his death. He had given strict orders not to be disturbed while sleeping, so when he didn't emerge from his room, his staff was too terrified to check on him. Talk about being a victim of your own success, or in this case, your own terrifying reputation. Nero Claudius Caesar. Now, just imagine your edgy, unpredictable, weird-ass teenage cousin as the Emperor of Rome, except this guy was also an arsonist who loved setting fire to everything he laid his hands on and had serious anger issues. This cousin is Nero Claudius Caesar, who wasn't content with just being a regular bad emperor. He made absolutely sure that nobody would take the crown from him even after he was dead and forgotten. One of his most infamous acts of madness was when he literally set entire villages and cities in Rome on fire for 6 whole days. The fire consumed and burned down every structure, but guess what the emperor was doing while this happened? He sat by his high palace window and played his harp guitar, probably composing some epic tunes about the destruction, after he used the opportunity to build his massive palace, the Domus Aurea. Now, because the Senate suspected foul play and needed a scapegoat for the destruction, dear Emperor Nero blamed the Christians. At his lavish garden parties, Nero would have Christians set ablaze and hung to use as human torches to illuminate his festivities. Nero's love life was equally as crazy as the season finale of a telenovela. He married his stepsister, Claudia Octavia, then got bored and had her exiled and executed. He then wed Poppaea Sabina, but when she criticized him, Nero allegedly kicked her to death while she was pregnant. Apparently, anger management classes weren't a thing in ancient Rome. After she died, he found a boy who looked like her, castrated him, and then married him. He even renamed the boy Poppaea, addressed him with female pronouns, and made him wear dresses. Nero's reign was so bad that the people in Senate finally started a rebellion. Faced with impending execution, Nero decided to take the coward's way out, and with the help of his secretary, stabbed himself in the neck, bringing an end to his 13-year reign of terror. Tsar Ivan the Terrible. So picture this. You're a 16th century Russian prince named Ivan, which literally means gracious, but history remembers you as terrible because of how wicked you were. Talk about a downgrade. Ivan was crowned Grand Prince of Moscow at the tender age of 3 after his father, Grand Prince Vasily III, passed away. You know how toddlers can be a handful. Now imagine one with a crown and an entire kingdom at his feet. It's like they gave him nuclear codes and a juice box to do as he pleased, and boy did he deliver. By the time he was 16, Ivan created his own personal police police force/terror squad called the Oprichnina. These guys were the medieval version of a biker gang, complete with black horses, black robes, and dog heads and brooms strapped to their saddles. The dog heads were to symbolize their role as Ivan's watchdogs, to sniff out treason and sweep away Ivan's enemies. The Oprichniki terrorized people, confiscated land, tortured, and executing anyone who even looked at Ivan the wrong way. In 1570, Ivan got a little paranoid. Okay, a lot paranoid, and decided that the city of Novgorod was plotting against him. His solution to this was a 5-week killing spree that left thousands dead. He rolled in with his boys and went full Thanos on the place. He had people slaughtered, drowned, and impaled. It was so bad that the river was clogged with corpses. Now, when he wasn't terrorizing his subjects, Ivan enjoyed, wait for it, torturing animals. Yup. In his spare time, he would throw animals off towers just to see what happened. Fortunately, after he accidentally killed his own son by hitting him with a scepter during a heated argument, the terrible king fell into a depression and died in 1584 while playing chess. Talk about the greatest checkmate. Mao Zedong. So, this guy is like that eccentric uncle who thinks he's an expert in everything from agriculture to medicine. Mao was literally that friend who would watch a YouTube video once about brain surgery and decide they can actually perform brain surgery. One time he decided that the Chinese needed to industrialize very quickly and told farmers to make steel in their backyards, which unfortunately was impossible. It's like trying to build a spaceship with Legos. Another time, he declared war on sparrows because they ate grain. Turns out sparrows also eat insects, so without sparrows, insects ate all the crops. He established many policies, one of which led to the largest famine in human history known as the Great Chinese Famine, which caused about 55 million people to starve to death. The number quickly went up to 80 million if you add the people who died during persecution, prison labor, and mass executions under his regime. If he thought you were intelligent, he'd kill you. Mao's face was everywhere. Money, posters, even giant statues. He shut down schools to purge teenagers of old ideas and replaced education with a book of his quotations, which you must read and carry around all the time. Not carrying it was like forgetting your phone today. Except instead of missing tweets, you might get sent to a re-education camp where you'll probably work till you drop dead. Mao ruled until he died of a heart attack in 1976 at the age of 82, leaving China with more ups and downs than a roller coaster designed by a drunk engineer. Despite all this, Mao's face is still on China's money. It's like keeping a photo of your toxic ex in your wallet. Pol Pot. If you were unfortunately born in Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, chances are you would most likely grow up into a very scared and disturbed adult. This was because a man named Pol Pot was currently the president of the country. Imagine a political leader whose policy-making process seemed inspired by a dystopian sci-fi novel written on a really bad acid trip. Pol Pot decided that history, culture, and modernity were so overrated that he'd reset the clock to year zero. He wanted to create an agrarian utopia, which sounds lovely until you realize it meant evacuating cities, abolishing money, and banning private property. Imagine waking up one day to find your entire country transformed into a giant farm commune. Families were torn apart, the sick and elderly were left to die on the roadsides, and an entire population was forced into a brutal farming lifestyle for which they were utterly unprepared. The guy equally had a bone to pick with intellectuals and hated education more than Italians despise pineapple on pizza. So, anyone wearing glasses? Suspect. Know how to read? Suspicious. It was like a twisted version of high school where the nerds were in real danger. Teachers, doctors, and anyone with an education were prime targets for execution. Just imagine being killed for looking too smart. He turned schools into detention centers and execution sites, and out of the estimated 17,000 people imprisoned there, only 7 are known to have survived. Pol Pot even renamed the country to Democratic Kampuchea, which is actually serious dark humor considering the fact that there was nothing democratic about his reign. Ironically, the man died of heart failure after the Vietnamese army came to rescue Cambodia. It turns out even Pol Pot had a heart, though he certainly never used it during his rule. Idi Amin. Imagine if the worst, dumbest bully in your school decided that he wanted to become principal and then just walked into the principal's office, unalives her, got comfortable in her office, and declared himself the new head of school. Sounds insane, right? Well, not to Idi Amin. In 1971, Amin decided that the presidency looked comfy, so he took it while the previous president was out of town. It's like calling dibs on your roommate's bed while they're on vacation, but with tanks. After the successful coup, he wasn't content with the title president, and decided to give himself a more befitting title which is honestly longer than a CVS receipt and included gems like His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, and Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea. Definitely impossible to fit all these on a business card. In 1972, Amin decided to play a twisted version of Monopoly with Uganda's economy. He expelled around 50,000 Asians who were the backbone of the country's trade and commerce. He gave them 90 days to leave, claiming he was directed to do that by God himself in a dream. It's like waking up from a nap and deciding to kick out everyone who knows how to operate a cash register. This idiotic move quickly tanked the country's economy, which he decided to solve by printing more money, but surprise, surprise, the economy only worsened. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline-soaked blankets. Amin's reign of terror came to an end in 1979 when Tanzanian forces, along with Ugandan exiles, overthrew his government. He fled to Saudi Arabia, where he lived out his days in luxury, proving that sometimes the bad guy doesn't get his punishment. It's like if Darth Vader retired to a beach house in Malibu. Francisco Franco. Francisco Franco is what you'd get if your grumpy grandpa who hates change and loves the good old days suddenly became a dictator. Before becoming dictator, Franco was a Spanish military general who didn't like the democratically elected government of Spain, so he and other military leaders staged a coup that lasted for 3 years and claimed about 500,000 lives, with countless more displaced or exiled. When the dust settled, Franco emerged as the winner in 1939, establishing himself as the undisputed leader of Spain. Once in power, he gave Spain an extreme makeover, fascist edition. He started by banning regional languages and then tried to make the nation self-sufficient. It didn't work, and the economy sank faster than a lead balloon in a swimming pool. One of the most disturbing aspects of Franco's regime was the snatching of babies. This guy would send people to kidnap the babies of families who didn't support him and give the babies to his supporters. Thousands of babies were displaced from their real families, which tore apart countless families and left a legacy of trauma that persists to this day. It's as if child services were operated by the evil stepmother from Cinderella. Another disturbing thing about this guy was the fact that the notorious Adolf Hitler was his best friend. They hung out and probably shared totalitarian tips, and Franco even sent troops to help Hitler on several occasions. Well, birds of a feather really do flock together. When he finally died in 1975, which was also when he gave up power, he had turned the country into a time capsule of oppression where women couldn't open bank accounts and divorce was illegal. Despite all these, Franco claimed he was preparing Spain for democracy. It's like saying you're training for a marathon by sitting on the couch eating chips all day. By the way, join our Discord server today to find out more about every single psycho leader out there. Austo Pinos Ugarte. Augusto Pinochet was Chile's military dictator with a fondness for helicopters and human rights violations. Before becoming dictator, Pinochet was a Chilean army officer who got bored of democracy and decided to stage a coup, which successfully made him leader on September 11, 1973. He took the wheels and led the country into a nightmare and chaos show that ran for 17 whole years. He first turned Chile's national stadium into a massive prison camp. It's like if the Super Bowl was hosted by the Hunger Games, minus the fun outfits, plus a whole lot of torture. He then teamed up with other South American dictators to hunt down leftists across the continent. This operation resulted in the deaths of an estimated 60,000 people across South America, with countless others subjected to torture and forced exile. Pinochet had a twisted obsession for using helicopters to execute people, but his favorite was throwing political opponents out of helicopters into the Pacific Ocean. This method of execution became known as death flights, and he particularly loved this method because it eliminated regime opponents and made it nearly impossible to recover bodies, leaving families confused about the fate of their loved ones. In 1988, the delusional guy set up a vote to see if people wanted him to keep ruling. He was super sure he'd win. Surprise, he lost. Big time. He finally stepped down in 1990 with the blood of over 3,000 Chileans on his hands, tens of thousands more tortured, and about 200,000 forced into exile. Maximilien Robespierre. The life of Maximilien Robespierre is like that of a super strict Sunday school teacher who decided to redesign society but with more beheadings. He was an 18th century French lawyer and statesman who was obsessed with turning revolutionary France into a republic of virtue, which was his philosophy of working hand in hand with virtue and a form of terror. He didn't just put this philosophy out there and left it, but he put it into action too and kicked off the Reign of Terror, a period so bloody it made horror movies look like Disney flicks. From 1793 to 1794, Maximilien beheaded about 17,000 people. It was like a really morbid game of whack-a-mole, but with aristocrats and enemies of the revolution. He also made it legal to arrest anyone suspicious, from sneezing weirdly and giving him funny looks to wearing your revolution badge wrong. You can get arrested and have your head cut off regardless of your age. While all these were happening, the National Convention, which was like the National Assembly of the Kingdom of France, created the Committee of Public Safety, where Maximilien was a prominent member. Despite its name, this was about as safe as juggling chainsaws. Maximilien used it to centralize power and speed up executions like he was trying to speedrun the most people beheaded category. However, in July 1794, his colleagues finally decided he was too extreme and turned on him. He was executed almost immediately, leaving France traumatized, blood-soaked, and probably in need of a good therapist. He'd turned the revolution into a circular firing squad, proving that you can, in fact, have too much of a good thing, especially if that thing is decapitation. Don't forget to join our Patreon if you want early access to our videos.